Welcome to Humble Beginnings, a podcast where we uncover the unconventional, more relatable paths to success. In this show, we'll share the stories before the C-suites, board memberships, and appointments, the stories of various upbringings, first jobs, career pivots, educational uncertainties, and more. This is the place to hear about their lives from the GovCon executives themselves. We hope you enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Humble Beginnings. I'm your host, Amanda Ziede, and our guest today is Gary Slack, President and CEO of XLA. Thank you for being here today, Gary.
Good morning, Amanda. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I'd like to start by talking a bit about your roots. I understand that you have a unique connection to the area. What are your family ties to Northern Virginia?
Oh, gosh, my roots go back to the Revolutionary time. I don't know where they came from originally, other than somewhere over in Europe. But my family on both sides has been around since the 1700s, and all in this area. I'm one of those unique Washingtonians that has been here, grew up here, and has seen a lot of change and stayed here.
Yeah, you don't hear that too often. So what was your childhood like growing up in the area, and how did this shape you?
Sure. I grew up in Sterling Park, which is right near Dulles Airport. It was a small, new community when I grew up there. Everything else was farms, as far as the eye could see here in Loudoun County. And it was a little bit like Mayberry. If you think of the Andy Griffith series, it was a little bit like that. Everything was self-contained. We all went to the same schools, same churches. And neighbors were in and out of people's houses all the time. So I think the shaping of that was it kept me very well grounded in terms of the realities of life. Both of my parents were hourly workers. My mom in retail, my dad in maintenance for the government. So it was pretty simple upbringing. Not a lot of extras and not a lot of stuff to do other than just hang out with your friends and families close by.
Gary, when we were talking before, you had sent me an article that was written about you years ago, and you mentioned what I believe to have been your first job and kind of spiraled into a few other jobs at a young age. And I believe this is when you got your business bug. So tell us about your donut business and what drove you to work at a pretty young age.
Well, I am the youngest of four children. We grew up in a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom little house, and we didn't have a whole lot. There certainly wasn't extra, I would say. We had enough to feed the family and pay our bills, but kind of paycheck to paycheck. And for whatever reason, I decided I wanted more. I wanted something, different. So I would look in the newspapers, and I found a little article or an ad in the paper saying, "Hey, wanted donut salespeople for this little business." And the idea was you would go door to door, take orders from people in the neighborhood, get money, and then on Saturday morning, a guy from somewhere would deliver me the donuts, and I would go deliver them. I did that for probably one summer. That was kind of the idea there was, well, you paid $1 a box for the donuts and you sold them for $2. The difference was what I got to use for my own enjoyment. And I saved it. I had a savings account, so my business mind started working very early, and that led to other jobs, a paper route with my brother. Then I started working when I was probably 14, 15 years old at a local hardware store. And to earn something is very rewarding if you get to reap the benefits of that hard work.
So funny. And I read that it was because originally you had wanted a color TV.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that was we had a black and white TV, and with 6 people in the house, there wasn't a whole lot of TV time. There were only a few channels at the time, but yeah, I had my eye on a TV, so I was saving up for a small little 10-inch color TV, and ultimately got that. And yeah, it sounds a little selfish looking back on it, but as a 10-year-old kid, you're kind of saying, "Hey, I need a little bit of private time, and I want to
Oh,
watch
yeah.
something too." So that's what that led to. So yes, I was very focused on. I had a business plan, was earn some money. This is what I was going to buy, and here's how I was going to enjoy it. So
It's a pretty good work ethic at a young age.
I didn't have anything else to do in those days. There were no computers. It was simply you go out and work or you go out and play. So I did a little bit of both.
That's awesome. How did this kind of progress through grade school and ultimately drive your entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, I think it certainly gave me that ability to interact with people, dealing with conflict and unhappy consumers. Certainly, whether it be the paper route or the donuts, if people weren't happy, as a kid, you have to deal with that. There was no safety net at the time. My parents weren't walking door to door with me. I was taking the complaints and I was having to go back and deal with it. So all of that stuff kind of shaped my abilities to interact and deal with people, and I enjoyed that aspect. Some people are very uncomfortable in those situations. For me, it led to what I did in high school and what I studied in high school. And I think they still do it today. It was called DECA back when I did it, Distributive Education Clubs of America. It was basically, you did marketing and business things. You got credits working at a store, and we ran the school store in the high school. All of those things, I was involved in that and did, sales demonstrations, at my store, and, did it for exams and grades and stuff in between. I also took accounting courses in high school because I realized that, the best business person is the one that actually understood the aspects of business, which probably led me to, my college studies and then what I ultimately have done, throughout my career, which is either, running finance part of business or running the entirety of the business.
It's not often that a high schooler is interested in taking accounting courses, though I'm sure very useful, but
Well, at the time, it was, a unique thing, and there weren't many people going into it. But I don't know, I was just fascinated by, the whole debits and credits and how that worked. But honestly, I tell, people today that if you understand how things work from a financial perspective in a business, you will always be able to recognize, the pitfalls, in a business either before, during, or after, some event. Most of the time, you should have, if you're good, you can prevent those things. But not understanding that can lead, to a blindness of people's abilities to function unless they've got trusted confidants that do that stuff. But I was always one to want to do it and understand it before I actually could tell others how to look for things and what to do.
very cool. Yeah, it's clear you had a knack for business at a young age, but I read also that your father-in-law or future father-in-law at the time was pretty influential. How did he influence your decision to go into business as well?
But unlike my own parents, who I said, they were very supportive of me, but they didn't do. I was like the odd man out in my family that I really liked this business thing. I didn't have any role models directly within my family. I had a couple of uncles that ran a local auto parts store, but I wasn't involved in that or close to that. So, and my wife and I, my current, my now wife. I started, dating her when I was in high school. I think I was 14 years old. So I was around my father-in-law at a very young age, and he was a banker, a local banker, and he was a business guy. He wore a suit to work every day, and I was fascinated by that. So I enjoyed the conversations. He had a brother-in-law that ran a local site development business that, I got exposure to. And so I think if you are around people that can stoke your interest and allow you to ask pertinent questions, you're either going to say I want more of that and I want to pursue that path, or oh, now that I know that, not going to go anywhere near that. So for me, it was the enabler that he was in that role, and he was a good role model, all the way around from an ethical standpoint, an honesty standpoint, and just a good human being. So all of that fed my desire to go into business.
All right, awesome. So after high school, you attended Longwood University, also in Virginia. So why did you choose this path, and what did you study in college?
I chose the path because my then girlfriend, now wife, had decided to go there. And her dad one day called me up and said, "Hey, taking Suzanne to Longwood, you want to go?" I thought, got nothing else to do today. I hopped in the car and went down there. And, once she got accepted, I was like, all right, I think I can go here. And honestly, it was one of the best choices I made because, one, it was a small school at the time, just a few thousand people. And so it was a little bit like a private college without being a private college. I decided to study accounting because I had done so well in high school in that, and it led to business things. And I thought, oh, I could see myself being an accountant and being a CFO because I was just so focused on the financial aspect at the time, and that's what I did, and that's what led me to what I've done throughout my career. But it shaped me because it was private. I had really good professors that took an interest in me because I took an interest in the subject. So I kind of was one of those odd men out that once you study some, I kind of knew from the beginning that I liked it. So therefore, I wanted to study it and I wanted to go into that business. Where I would say many people, certainly in today's environment, study something because somebody tells them to, as opposed to because they really love it. I actually really did love what I studied, and therefore, was able to have some success throughout my career as a result of that.
It does seem easier when you love what you're learning and doing, so that makes sense. Did you work throughout college as well?
I sure did. I worked as both the hardware store. I did house painting. I built fences. I built decks. I anything to make a buck. Quite honestly, because I didn't have any support from my family. They didn't have any money to send me. So yeah, I had to fund it myself or take loans or do work stuff. I worked during college at the dining hall. So whatever back then you needed to do to make ends meet, I did.
Awesome. All right. So, what was your first job after college, in terms of your track in your professional career?
Sure, you might laugh at this. I got out of school in the mid 80s, which at the time interest rates were exceedingly high. We were still trying to get inflation down, and jobs weren't plentiful. I ended up going to work for a moving company down in Tyson's. Lo and behold, it was a government contractor. It provided movers for, I think, Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation was their main client. It was the craziest thing I ever got into. It was a little family owned business, had some weird stuff going on between the owners and their kids and stepkids. And it was, I look back on it and think, how did I even get into that? But I lasted there about a month and realized that wasn't good for me because I just got married right out of school. So my first real professional job was for the Virginia Department of Taxation. I got out and was a state tax auditor. That also, I proved that I didn't really want to be a public servant in that role because my entrepreneurial spirit was still burning high, and you really couldn't affect anything that way. So then I went to work for Honeywell Federal and got a real taste of government contracting, and kind of that was the trajectory that started my real success. Once I found something I loved to do, promotions came and different jobs, and people recruited me outside. So that was a little bit of the early days of my career.
Awesome. Yeah. So, tell us a bit about how those transitions and opportunities came about for you. How your career progressed afterwards, and why certain opportunities were ones that you would take.
Sure. Well, when I was with Honeywell, again, I had started out doing, standard, accounting stuff, receivables and payables and treasury work. And I was studying for my CPA exam. I wanted to get that again. I had both my father-in-law and his brother-in-law were encouraging me, saying, "Hey, you need to do this for professional development." So I ended up getting my CPA, but I didn't really want to go into public accounting. I wanted to go into corporate accounting, whereby that skill set really was a requirement, as opposed to, okay, you have it, but you don't need it for this job. So the jobs that I had at Honeywell didn't require it, but they were good functioning, jobs that had given me 3 promotions during my 4 years there. I ended up getting recruited by another contractor across the street from where I was there in Tyson's, local BDM, big government contractor, that did have the requirement that I be a CPA, and I have certain requirements. And then I hooked up with some people that were real workaholics, but they taught me, one, that you got to put in the time and extra stuff. If you like it and you seek it, everybody there would provide additional information. So I tell that to people today, that sometimes, if you just stay in your lane, you're probably going to miss opportunities, especially if you get into the kind of company. BDM was, a couple $100 million at the time. It had been bought by Ford Aerospace. Well, lo and behold, 6 months later, the Carlyle Group ended up taking BDM private. It was their first defense acquisition when they started the fund back in 1989, 1990 time period. So with that, I probably learned more in the first several years working for BDM than most people would learn in a career. It was honestly that addictive of an environment, whereby we joke now that it was almost cult-like, because there was a group of about 4 to 6 of us in the finance realm that, after it was sold by Ford Aerospace and taken private, a lot of people left during that transition. I stayed, and it was one of the best things I ever did, because it connected me to people that were meaningful in the space, some leaders that walked through between the Earl Williams and the Phil O'Deans that led the company over those years. Those tied into things that I did. For example, Phil O'Dean was part of BDM. He also was a board member at Kinetic when I went to work there. So, when you get mentors and people that teach you things, and if you're willing to do things outside of your job jar, if you will, that's what helped me accelerate my career, probably more so than some others would have done at a similar age and experience level.
Right. And I know we're skipping around a bit, but what ultimately led you to XLA and becoming president and CEO of a company?
Sure. Well, I had, as you see in my background, I had helped develop BA systems in North America. When I started there, it was about $1 billion business made up of 20 little companies. And we went on a buying spree, and we ultimately, I went from being a controller to the CFO, and then we bought United Defense in about 2005 timeframe and changed the shape of that business. And a couple of years later, I had the privilege to run that business as the president of that group. And that was, an honor of a lifetime, and gave me that bug to say, you know what, I can run the operation. I had a finance background, but I was very operationally focused. Surrounded by a lot of good people, and ran that business for 3 years, prior to leaving. Then I got picked up by Kinetic. They needed some help. That ultimately led to a sale of that business. Then during that period of time is when I had kind of said, you know what do I want to do next? Mm-hmm. And I had always dealt with private equity folks when I would help buy the businesses that they were selling. And along the way, I met some folks, and I met the principal from the Halifax group from the time I was leaving Kinetic, and kept in touch with him. And one day, he called up and said, "Hey, we've got something we'd like you to take a look at," and ultimately asked me if I wanted to come and help transform the business and see what we could do to improve. It was a fixer upper. It was a distressed business that they had put together and had some unfortunate things happen. So with my background, they're like, let's see, try. That was now almost 8 years ago. Brought me there. And we've had some pandemics, we've had some shutdowns, we've had all kinds of craziness during that time. But that's what led me to XLA. And I think one of your questions was, did I ever envision being a president or CEO? I wouldn't put that at the top of my head. I would say I always wanted to try my hand of leading a business and taking all of that experience between BDM and BAE systems that I had garnered, and then certainly the Kinetic business. There was a lot of M&A, a lot of really fun stuff I did along the way. It's like, I think I can do this. That's what led me to it. And you're only as good as the team you have around you. And sometimes you gotta go back and put your training wheels back on now and then to restart the riding of the bike. So that's what led me there. That's what's kept me there, which was the commitment to the employees and the leaders that I lead, as well as the PE firms. Say, look, we've got something. We're going to make it better than when I got here, and eventually, I'd like to complete the transformation and figure out the next place for XLA to recognize its growth trajectory.
Awesome. Well, I do have one last reflective type question for you. When you think about some of the opportunities that you've had and experiences throughout your life, some driven by personal decisions, professional decisions, what are some life lessons that you take away and that you'd pass on to the next generation?
Now, I think first and foremost is your career is a journey, right? It's not a quick trip around the corner and skipping from place to place. You got to have some patience. I think I've had to learn that along the way. You mentioned it earlier, enjoy what you do or do what you enjoy, right? It's, which side is it? Or am I, doing it because I need to, or am I doing it because I enjoy it? I think, my lessons learned is if you enjoy what you do, you will find success. If you don't, if you're just doing something because you think it's what somebody else wants you to do, or it's because it's paying the bills, you might never reach that pinnacle that you're looking for, if that's the case. And probably the most important is treat others the way that you want to be treated. There's nothing like reflecting in the mirror and having a conversation, say, how did I take that? So, that's a hard lesson. And it took me a while to kind of, get to that point that, I could say, what, if I treated somebody poorly, would I have responded the same way? And if that's the case, I'd say, what, I need to make it right. And lastly, I think success is ultimately defined by what you leave behind in any of your businesses. And I take great pride in some of the businesses that I've left and the people I've left behind that have gone on to do other things and found success, or have at least said, what, you made a positive difference, on me, on us as an organization while you were here. So those things, when you're in the heat of the moment, you're not going to necessarily, reflect on that. But, once what's said when you're gone is, I think, more importantly, the measure.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gary, if there's one thing I've learned from conducting some of these interviews, it's that, well, first of all, you can never predict where someone's next move is going to be or what's going to happen in the near future. But it's also that the CEO role or leading a company as CEO isn't even close to being the last endeavor for lots of our executives in this industry. So what does the future look like for you now? I know you talked a bit about XLA and its growth, but do you have any personal or professional aspirations that you hope to achieve?
Sure. That's a great question because many people think as you get to the twilight of your career that you're done learning, you're done having, desires to do things. I think certainly for me, I could see my next part of my journey is giving back by serving on various company boards. I have a couple that I serve on now, but I think my give back to the community and where I find some of my experiences are very useful is through board work. So I think that's one of the things, and just simply to enjoy life. Every day there's somebody that is no longer with us in this world as a result of never taking the time to enjoy what success has brought them. So I don't want to be that guy. So my wife and I we'll spend time going places that we haven't gone, enjoying things that we haven't enjoyed, and trying to live life to the fullest while at the same time, being good citizens of this world.
Awesome. What a lovely note to end on. Gary, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today and imposing some of your wisdom and lessons learned throughout your career. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Amanda. I appreciate the ability to talk to you guys, and it's always a pleasure to see you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Humble Beginnings. Check out WashingtonExec.com to find more of our podcasts and profiles on executives. See you next time.